Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to another Critique of the Week. Looking forward to another awesome critiquing experience. As always, the critique is a chance to give that workshop experience to anybody who'd like to step up to the plate. If you want to have your poems critiqued, all you do is go to rattle.com, go to our submissions page on Submittable. There's a whole critiquing option there. And if you'd like to have poems critiqued, you can submit 2 poems. It's always good to look at 2. And then we'll pull you out as it makes sense to do so. So just do that. It's really easy to participate. I think we've got, how many do we have in the queue? We have 78 in the queue. That's fewer, actually. So that's fewer than we had recently. Usually it's hovered around 100. So we haven't, so eventually we might run out of submissions. We'll see. But there are 78 waiting their turn. And so today what we're going to do is go through the oldest ones in the queue as quickly as possible, just to sort of clear them out. The oldest one is February 22nd, 2022. But let's see. So Dick Westheimer's here, Terry R., Nate Jacob, Monica Dobos, Phyllis Charrett, good to see you all, James Langford, D. Coleman's here, Tom Barlow. Have I said Tom already? Yeah, good to see you all. Monica Dobos asks, how is the NFT conference? It was really interesting. It was like sort of looking into the future. We're not there yet, but in the future, everyone's going to have a crypto wallet in their phone. And they're going to do a whole bunch of things through that. It's going to be things like event ticketing, airplane tickets, DMV registration, all sorts of brand type interactions. The way you interact with brands is going to be through NFTs eventually. We're not quite there. The big talk at the conference was all about adoption and getting people on board and not... but it's coming. So it was really interesting to look at how that's going to affect the publishing industry and the opportunities that might arise from that. And like Dick says, yeah, we do the Poetry Space with Katie Dozier. It's over on Twitter, but it's also on most streaming services as a podcast. We just pull the audio and make it as a podcast. So that's every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. There are a few episodes about NFTs where we talk to NFT poets and people like that. If you type in the Poetry Space into like Spotify or Amazon or iTunes, you'll find that. So you can listen along if you're curious to know more about NFTs. I thought we would start out the critique, though. Let me see, I forgot to make sure Facebook is working. Something popped up. Okay. So Bev Wendell Atherstone is here. Sharon Ferrante, Jenny Middleton over on Facebook. We got Tara Meselik McMahon, John Atkinson's here, Joe Barca, hello, Katie Dozier, just talking about you, hey Katie. So we have a bunch of crew over on Facebook too. Twitter no longer works for streaming, I should add too. So we'll never be streaming on Twitter again. They closed their media studio. I didn't realize that, so I was trying to find on the Rattlecast last week. I was scrambling around trying to, why can't I find the studio? What's going on? Well, it turns out they cut the entire service of desktop streaming to save like bandwidth and resources and stuff. So no more Twitter, but it's hard to interact on Twitter anyway. So it's kind of a pointless use of a stream anyway. So we are only on Facebook and YouTube now. That looks like how it's going to be the case in the future. I thought we'd start out though, before we get into the critique poems that were submitted, I thought it's always fun to look at other poems we published. And we had 2 prose poems in a row. Yesterday's poem was the Ekphrastic Challenge winner. And that was a prose poem about the lighthouse. And today we have a slightly longer prose poem, Binge, which was part of our Irish Poets issue this spring by Lauren O'Donovan. And I thought we'd just talk a little bit about, because every time we publish submit a prose poem, I get email. It's the exact same email. You'd think it's the same person, but it's like a different person every time who says, this is great, but it's not a poem. And so we'll talk a little bit about what makes a poem, and is this a poem? So this is Binge from Lauren O'Donovan, a kind of narrative in prose. Is it a poem? Let's take a peek. Here we go. This is Binge by Lauren O'Donovan. And I'll just let Lauren read it. The Irish accent makes poetry sound great, so it's better than me reading. Let's do this.
I make an excuse to go to the village. I grab my bag, the one with the zip pockets stuffed with scrunch coils of undone polo rolls, and loose mints buried like eggs in a nest of popped blister packs, body spray, cheap lighters, and a bottle of that green little hand sanitizer that eats all regretful scent except the chemical afternotes of itself. Then I'm in the garage shop, focused as a bolt, marching to the cashier, guarding those blank cabinet doors like they're filled with pornography. In response to my request, the cashier turns to search dispenser buttons. Their judgment is already spent on the slow tick of the shift clock, and there is none left for me or my life choices. I reach for the pack after that digital tick of approval confirms I haven't yet burned all the money in the bank. I go past the petrol pumps, the car wash, far down the back of the lot, where there are 2 wooden tables with wonky cloth umbrellas. The whole area is sticky from scraps of fast food left by teenagers in such a rush to grow up, there's no time to put rubbish in bins. The crows swoop down and shake containers of garlic mayonnaise, so seats and feathers alike get speckled white. I sit in my corner where a block of parked cars offer protection from sisters-in-law and moms from the school. I rip open the pack, remembering to zip pocket the little strip of plastic and silver paper, as I'm now 20 years disposing of the evidence of this crime, and I suppose that makes me a master criminal. I light the first cigarette, which is always the best, not just because of the heat in my throat, the relief in my chest, and the glorious rare silence now loud in my head, but because there are 19 more escapes left in the pack, and all consequence is abstract and far distant past that. When I did this almost 10 years ago, sitting on steps outside a supermarket, I smoked 3 in a row and then vomited into a reusable shopping bag. I swore then I would never smoke again, but over the years I guess I have improved in some way, because now I can easily smoke 3 and as many as 6 before I start to feel sick with a headache pecking the frown lines between my eyes. When I'm done, sated past the point of nausea, I walk to the red bin cheerfully emblazoned with immortal ice creams that never melt, only fade with age. I throw away the half-empty pack along with the butts I've gathered up, because an ornithologist friend once told me about a job where he had to cut open dead baby birds to determine how they died. They discovered the bird parents had fed their babies cigarette butts, one by one, like fat plastic worms. The butts filled the babies' stomachs like concrete, too big to leave and too jealous to let anything else inside. And so the baby birds starved with full stomachs, then died.
Yeah, and so that was today's poem by Lauren O'Donovan Binge. And the thing so what is a poem is the question that comes up a lot. And a poem to me is the music of speech, and even more particularly the creation of meaning through the music of speech. It's an ancient tool that we've been using for 200,000 years, possibly. As long as the FOXP2 gene, that's how long it suggests that we've been doing that, because it's a gene that's involved with grammar. That's how long that we've had that gene that regulates some aspects of grammar. So we can know we've been using language for that long, and we've been using language for that long to make meaning. That's how we carve out objects. We make mental objects out of the world through sounds, and adding symbolic associations to sounds. So at first it was like like, oh no, eagle, is the first, or food over there. And then we carve the entire world out of that. And that is poetry, the creation of meaning through the building of sound. It's really that simple. And so anything where sound is making meaning, I think, is a poem. And it exists on a continuum, though, because fiction does that too. And what's the difference between poetry and fiction is always a question that comes up in rattle casts and questions and interviews all the time. And the difference to me, it sort of exists on a continuum between your breath or your lungs or your heart, your body, and your mind's eye. That's how I think of it. And so fiction exists in the movie that you're building in your head through words. And that's why it's a little different. Even though it can have poetic elements, it's still more focused on the scene it's creating. And you're trying to get somebody to forget their body almost in fiction. You want to enter into the space that you're creating, into the movie you're creating, into the story, and forget that you have a body. In poetry, you want to do that too, but you want to remember that you have the body, because your body becomes the poem, or the speaker's voice becomes you. You're the medium for the poem, and that's sort of the continuum. But it's not like a discrete finite difference between the two. It's a continuum, and so does this push far enough into prose where it becomes more like that, where it's more the mind's eye, or is it the voice? Like, which one matters more? And that's the question to me, as far as whether it's a poem or it's prose. And then at the end of the day, we're talking semantics too. I mean, it's just how we define things. So does it really matter if a poetry magazine publishes a piece of flash fiction, if you could call it that? But anyway, I mean, let's look at this poem a little bit in more detail. So binge. And the story, to me, I assume I'm interpreting it right, is that to prevent myself from smoking every day, I'm binging on smoking to make myself sick so that I don't want cigarettes anymore. And doing this every so often so I can continue for 20 years, so I continue to not be a non-smoker. And so really we get first-person direct storytelling in this. I make an excuse to go to the village. I grab my bag, the one with the zip pockets stuffed with crunched coils of undone polo rolls and loose mints buried like eggs in a nest of pop blister packs, body spray, cheap lighters, and a bottle of that green little hand sanitizer that eats all regretful scent except the chemical afternotes of itself. So one very short sentence and one very long sentence to beginning, but we really get the personality of the speaker. It's such a monologue already. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's a poem, is because it's a really strong monologue. Like, we're really riding in with the first person narrator, and the voice really matters too. And that's what a poem really is. Then I'm in the garage shop, focused as a bolt, marching to the cashier, guarding those blank cabinet doors like they're filled with pornography. And so this poem is full of great details like that. So much going on, just in painting the scene and having these, guarding the doors like they're filled with pornography. Like, we get metaphor throughout. And then the entire poem we get in the end. I'm not going to read the whole poem again. But the poem is full of great details like that in that first-person narrative voice. Where you're really strongly embodying the speaker. And so we continue through in that way. And then we get to this metaphor, which is an extended metaphor that sort of closes out the poem. So I'm done. I'm sated past the point of nausea. So I'm done doing my binging thing so I don't have to be a smoker anymore for a while. I walk to the red bin cheerfully emblazoned with immortal ice creams that never melt, only fade with age. So that's a metaphor there too, because this process never changes, right? I throw away the half-empty pack along with the butts I've gathered up because an ornithologist friend told me about a job where he had to cut open a dead baby bird to determine how they died. And so this story about the birds being filled with cigarette butts becomes a parallel to myself filling myself up with cigarette butts. With cigarettes, so keeping to binge smoke these cigarettes every so often, and so the speaker becomes the baby bird at the end too, and so and then leaves us hanging with that sort of holding up this comparison and then saying, what does it mean? And so I think on every level it's a poem. There's no doubt. Actually, I was thinking maybe that we would go through this poem and I would think that and say that sometimes I'm not sure myself, and just publish a poem anyway because I liked it. But in this case, I think it's clearly a poem. So let's see what everybody's saying about it over on the stream. Yeah. Yeah, so Susan Talley says there's a surprise at the ending, the binge killing off baby birds. The effects of a binge on nature is a poetic idea, and I hear I am a pentameter with rhyme. There's a lot of sense of meter in the poem too. Let's see. Emily D. Ferrari says, I don't know the answer, but when prose is poetic, we say that it is pure poetry. So I think this is poetry. And DeQuester points out there's also a rapid shifting of frames. That, through the music, keeps meaning alive. Yeah, exactly, yeah. And Tammy Greenwood points out, I love how she's worried about the safety of the birds and not herself so much. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in that, like, tag ending. I think I think they call it that, right? I took one film class, like for producers at USC, and I think they call that a tag at the end, where it's like turning to the audience and saying, like, a lot of times it's like, oh, there's going to be a sequel. But there's a lot of ways that sort of tag the audience. And it kind of tags the audience at the end with that metaphor, where the baby bird is obviously, the speaker is obviously the baby bird too. But what does that mean? Is it the destruction I'm doing to myself? Is that what we're worried about? Or the effect that it has on the world? And so there's a lot of things that we can think about, but it doesn't explain. And so that's another reason why it works really well as a poem. Yeah. And Terry R. points out focus is a bolt. There's just tons of great lines in this. And Phyllis Charette says, true, but English tends to be intrinsically iambic. Yeah, it does. I mean, that's the thing. Iambic pentameter is the natural way of speaking. We almost very frequently just fall into iambics because that's just how the language works. It has an unstressed, like, the sun, like so many of those things have an article and then the stress. Or if it's a two-syllable word, we tend to have the second syllable stressed. And so it makes the whole language of English very iambic. Lisa Seidenberg says that's called a tease. In my class, they called it a tag. But let's see. But anyway, so Nate Jacob says, I do like this good writing. Enjoyed almost every single word. Someone says confession. Nate Jacob says, I usually skip over non-lineated poems. Am I part of the grand conspiracy? May the prose poetry muses spare me my life. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. To be honest, when I see a submission in its prose, poem, I'm not excited. but sometimes it works really well, and it does in this case. Yeah, so Cynthia Sim says, I have a very enlarged idea about poetry and can certainly accept prose poems as poetry. I think the Lighthouse poem is more clearly a poem. This one's a shapeshifter, but I like that aspect too. Yeah, the reason why I wanted to go over this one and not the Lighthouse, I'll put it up on screen in case you missed it, but we won't read it. But the Lighthouse was yesterday's poem, and this was more clearly a poem because you need to be human, you need to know, you need to feel old. It has that repetition in each paragraph. Which makes it the repetition is an aspect of poetry. It's a rhetorical device. It's a poetic rhetorical device, and so this more clearly. It's just sort of like, I know it's almost like they're just long lines because of the repetition, and it's just structured like this. So this is more clearly a poem, which is why I picked the other one to talk about a little bit. So anyway, it's a little bit discussion of prose poems. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter much. If people submit it and call it a poem and it's interesting, to me, I think it's worth publishing. If it goes on too long and has a lot of dialogue, it starts to really feel like fiction. But really, to me, it's that if the goal of the writer seems to be to make yourself become completely lost in the story, then it's fiction. Or it's prose. Even in, I keep saying fiction, but it could be an essay too. You want to become completely lost in the idea. So prose, you want to ignore the fact that you have breath, and you want to focus on the mental objects that you're creating, and that's what prose does, and that's why we use prose, because it doesn't distract. The shape of the words don't distract from the semantic meaning and the mental objects that you're building in that space inside your head. And we want to have the text as distant as possible from it. But in poetry, you want to focus more on the sound and the breath, and you want to be always aware of the actual speech going on. And if you're sort of constantly aware of the speech, then it's poetry, even if it's formatted in prose. That's the takeaway at the end of the day. Okay, well, that's 20 minutes on that poem and that topic. Let's go on to some actual poems to critique. Let's see, this one is... This one's kind of long. I think we'll just read it and talk about it instead of, maybe I'll do it this way. Maybe I will download the file. and pull it up. So this is Silhouette of Budget 2022. The poet is Sonal Gupta. And let's take a look. It's long. I think that's why I skipped it, because I think it's a little long for critique to really dig in. But let's take a look at it anyway. Silhouette of a Budget 2022. Again, the poet is Sonal Gupta. From coinage to digital maze, the Union Budget 22 postulates deafening the resonation of cryptocurrencies, imposing 30% tax on its earned monies. Neither traders nor recipients are immunized, as the offset to any has faced rejection in budget memoir. So already I'm feeling interesting. We're talking about cryptocurrencies and stuff. We were just talking about NFTs at the top of the show. But I'm already feeling a very stilted. It's hard to follow because the language is so sort of corporate speak, or so I don't know. There's just a sense of like, who is the speaker? I mean, to me already, I'm feeling a little just lost, like trying to find the voice. Like we talked just now about how a poem is the music of speech coming from a person, then embodying you. And I'm having trouble like getting into the sense of the speaker. Digital assets is now a distant dream until the legislation regulating the crypto marks its presence from an absent teen. So we get the rhymes coming in a little bit. But withstanding the France 2022 bill, central bank to release Indian digital currency in early 2023. I wonder if that happened, because this is a year later. So it feels like a quick news release memo is the voice of it, and I'm having trouble like figuring out, situating myself as to who's telling me, who's talking to me, whose voice is trying to become me. The hearth for telecom, the Union Budget 22, a paragon, swiveling the pages of the Economic Survey, Budget 2022, sorry, unveiled the foibles in telecom. This resulted in the reasoning for boosting 4G, infusing liquidity, investing into 5G domes. Roll calls for 5G auctions to be holoed. The production linked incentive. So it really sounds almost like a found poem. Like we took some corporate, I wonder if there's an explanation. There's no explanation whatsoever, just silhouette of a budget. It sounds like it's actually like a budget report that's been cut and pasted into a poem. And that's kind of interesting to do, but you have to sort of sustain our interest still. I can't and do it in ways that are surprising and also short maybe enough that we can stay interested and motivated to keep reading. And let's see. A new scheme to be launched for 5G services, last for beyond. Then Mighty Universal Obligation Fund rescued the rural, allocating the 5% of annual collections for broadband and mobile service proliferation. So it's really feeling like a found poem to me, and it's just words taken from some kind of budget report. And how can we make more music into it? How can we add? How can we just not make it feel like we're reading a budget report? That should be the goal of a poem like this. Concocting the transport connectivity, the Union Budget 22's motivity enabled a digital platform, tracking the infrastructure projects perform. And there's also a way that we've dropped some articles and things. Tracking the infrastructure projects perform under PM, that makes it harder to read too. Under PM, Gati Shakti Plan, the budget unfolds the development to reach its goal, collaboration with natural infrastructure pipeline in whole. So there is this rhyme that keeps coming up, the unfolds whole, but that's not enough music to sustain it. We need to find some kind of music here, and that doesn't have the music, even though it's coming. I know it's trying to do, but it hasn't found a way to make this into music yet. To accelerate the logistical synergy in all modes, the baffling railways running. I'm trying to see because this keeps going. I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time on this, because I think that's the only thing I have to say, is it needs to be shorter and find a way to present this in a way that has music. How does it end? Let's see. We'll read the last two stanzas here. Tax incentives to include startups, and the Union Budget 22 to set up an expert committee to address the regulatory issues of venture capitalists and private equity investors, online gaming to be in the budget's pool, a proposal to set up animation, visual effects, gaming, and comic AVGC sector, employing young Indians a new boon. But the Union Budget 22 was not meant for middle class and poor men who search for a combination of tax breaks and cash handouts. In the budget's route to this end, a durable momentum of the economy is still under recovery because COVID pandemic has caused huge misery. So the end is a kind of a summarizing of what we're trying to get out of this. And I think we should look up at some cut up poetry. I'm trying to think if there's anything good that we could use as an example. You know what? I do have a good idea here. This is I have to find it though. It's like what's it called? Because it's a poet that we've had in a bunch. Yeah, here we go. This is Drug Facts Continued by Brent Fisk. We'll just take a quick peek at this because this takes language from a warning label for drug facts and then makes it into interesting poetry. And so he does it by using the language of the actual warning label, but then injecting different things that you wouldn't usually find there. Okay, so it's like drug facts, and it's continued, which is kind of funny too. Warnings: allergy alert. Ibuprofen may cause a severe allergic reaction, which may include beehives, ego swelling, postcoital drip, electric shock. Stomach bleeding warning. Taking more than the recommended may cause stomach bleeding or death, as many people use ibuprofen to commit suicide, but our legal and advertising departments would prefer that you use another painkiller if you plan on doing yourself in. Please see a doctor if you're considering this option. And a friendly reminder, suicide by ibuprofen may cause stomach bleeding. And so it goes on like that, using the voice of it, but saying, sort of making fun of drug facts in different ways. By changing what it's actually saying, but still staying in that same voice. So that's one of the ways you can use a voice like this and make it interesting, is by turning things on its heel and making it surprising. And then you use that voice from the warning label or from the budget report and do it that way. So this was Brent Fisk's poem. If you want to look it up, Drug Facts by Brent Fisk from sorry to make you dizzy with all the scrolling, from Rattle number 33. Oh, there's the tribute to humor, which was actually the hardest issue we ever did, the tribute to humor. Because it's the funny thing about humor is that it's really easy. It's the easiest place in the world to do humor at a poetry reading, because everybody's like waiting for some serious thing, and there's this like expectation, and there's sort of this nervous energy, and then it's really easy to break that with laughter. But then ironically on the page, it's the opposite, and it's so hard to be actually funny when all you have are text and no voice, because so much of humor is the presentation. So it ended up being a really hard issue to put together, but that was one of the poems from the humor issue. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to go. Okay, let's move on to the next poem. And I didn't even look at the comments for that. I apologize, but I should look at the comments. Let me see what everybody said. Yeah, so Brian O'Sullivan suggests maybe turn up the bureaucratic language, economics lingo, so it becomes more of a satire, which is a good... Yeah, that's kind of what Brent was doing there in Drug Facts. In a satirical poem, Brian continues, could the cacophony count as music the way it does in some modern music? I think so, yeah, I think so. Yeah, and so Tammy Gordon says it's hard to connect to it if it sounds too technical. Yeah. Okay. And over on... Yeah, so Sharon French says, I love humor, not always easy. It is. And I was just thinking, too, I want to write more humorous poems just so I have, if I'm present at a poetry reading and you need to break the ice that way, I need to have some that are there in my back pocket. Anyway. Yeah, it's a great point. So Jenny Middleton says the song Fitter, Happier, that's Radiohead. Fittier, happier, more productive, comfortable. That is... that works because the irony comes over the voice of the singer. Just some thoughts. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. And Jenny points it out. Sorry to lower the tone, but there is a song by Radiohead that uses technical speech in an ironic way, is how she puts it. Yeah. Okay, and then the one other interesting note too. Where was that? Jenny Minton also says, I think there needs to be another voice intercepting the technical budget report language. That's a good way to think of that, about a different voice intercepting it. And that's what Brent Fisk was doing with Drug Facts. So really good way to characterize that. Okay, let me move on to the next poet. And the next poet is Xerxes Price. We'll pull this up really quickly. Better Off That Way is the poem. Better Off That Way. And I have to, let's see, I think I probably have to, switch to, there we go. So here's Xerxes Price, Better Off That Way. And Xerxes, if you're watching, well, never mind. Okay, so this is Better Off That Way. Better Off That Way, softly and deep voice times 2. Today's the day, the parades, the coming to town, faster tones. Here it comes, the greatest show on 3 Earth. Repeat, ZUR lied to me, damn, gave me 5, said goodbye to me. Here it come, the shakiest vibes, if ever I should die. Should I be, shall I plead, for another chapter written of me. My disease is quote-unquote dopes of privileges spent on me, hearts and smokes, thumps and hopes, Pandora's releasing my clutches. Now as a song prolongs, feeling on grown what I said in that song. Tracks, chapters, damn written in scribes, killing the time's minds, so all the flakiest moments I shall rise. Back with a hat on the grind, maybe a side and then a smoke something, brought money, new shit, dope, writing dope's money, damn, thought I heard the last of it, as the season's malaria scares, beware, the cold cough serum, I got a call from ya in a moment's time, a split thought cough is coughing from ya, now, so off ya, up the membranes, so fucked up. Damn it, the luck playing. How long does this go? Okay. I think we got another one. We're not going to do the whole one because we get the gist of it. And here, I think that this is one of those things where the voice isn't shown clearly in the text, so it actually makes it really hard to read. There's a good example. I'm trying to think of a good example that uses, let's see. I can't think of anything. What is the name of that poet? I don't know. It's too deep into the what's the word? The slang, or not the slang, whatever, the mode of speaking. To make it so I can sort of hear how it might sound, and hear that it might sound like really good performed, but the way that it's written makes it really difficult to actually read. And so I'm having trouble following that, and that's the problem with it. It also has a lot of it needs more images and ideas to work on the page, because when we have, as a spoken word poem, it probably works pretty well, but when you transfer that to the page, it ends up having a lot of emptiness, a lot of stuff that's just really the presentation of personality and tone and things like that. So things like, damn it, the luck playing, kid in my brains beginning a tumor, rooms filled with lines, cubicles. The rooms filled with lines, cubicles is kind of interesting. So we need more of stuff like that. But the damn it, the luck playing, kidding, that kind of thing only works in an actual monologue where you're giving it and performing it. And so that's really always the problem with slam poetry. Moving into the page is a difficult task, and sometimes stuff that works orally doesn't work as well just reading it. And I think that's what's going on mostly here. Let's see. What else could we say about it? I think that, well, we could just read the last. Damn, won't let go, I know how the story all ends, my friends damned, no doomsday, if it all awaits the dates. So we see, the thing is too, I can kind of hear after I get past the line how the music would have played. things like "if it all awaits the dates," like that's a great rhyme in there if you're performing it, but having it presented on the page like this, you don't hear it as you're reading it. You sort of, it's like the sheet music doesn't really match up. It's almost like trying to sheet music jazz or something, where there's these spontaneous riffs kind of going on, and it's not really captured in the actual music that you see on the page. And so you have to like add a lot to the performance of these words to make it work in the right way, if that makes clear. So I think it's a way that just it's really difficult for this kind of poem to work in a book. If it all awaits the dates, the horizons, virtual universes. See, even that virtual universes has a great rhyme when you're speaking it. You late, like wait, the fuck together, and all is left up to us. If the world's like that, wired, and the urges recourse, the networks may begin. See that like those kind of slang type things, I'm not sure what it's even. If I heard it, it would be fine, but I'm not sure what it is just looking at it. Networks ma begin. Then all the ways, plays, roots, multi unlimited, plant of demise, remembering sins and the all. See this kind of thing, the sins and the all. I mean, that probably is something when you're speaking it and trying to put it on the page, but it doesn't translate to me as a reader, because this is like, a poem is the sheet music for breath, and it's not telling me enough to let me play the music myself. And so it's kind of like, really, it's like handing somebody music who can play the piano, and then I can play it if I can play the piano. But this is like not enough, doesn't show all the notes, and so I can't really get it out. Dams up, so happy, plot politely, bit me tragically, rapture's majesty, and the rest is just written folk, allure the suns around, rotations and disasters, fueling all minds and naturals, universals, a mind's getting at you. So that's how that goes. I think that's all I have to say about that. I think it's something that's really difficult to translate on the page. I'm trying to think of the one, from the Slam issue. Let me just look at the Slam issue and see what, because that was an issue even with the Slam poetry issue, was trying to find ones that both worked on the page and performed, and it's a different medium, and so it makes it difficult. I'm trying to find the one that like played that the most, where it was so much in presentation, and yet it showed it on the page really well too. Maybe it was Reggie Gibson's eulogy of Jimmy Christ. Let me see. So check this out. This is Reggie Gibson, eulogy of Jimmy Christ from Rattle number 27. The audio is here, but see, so I'm going to read it and see how. I'll read a little bit, then I'll play a little bit, and you can see how the sound is much better transferred through the words on the page, so it's easier to read, and then you can feel it. So anyway, burn it down. You burned it all down, or all the way down, Jimmy. Made us burn in the flame that became your sound, Jimmy. Grabbed old Legaba by his neck, made him show you your respect. Hoochie man, coochie man, strangling him. Hoochie coochie, hoodoo man, wrangling him, voodoo child. Made his steel strings sing. So you get that steel string, ache, bend, break, sin, capitulate, give in to the will of your beautiful, blessed fingers. So it goes like this, and you can see, so I can read that the way that Reggie Gibson did, and here, we'll give you a listen to Reggie Gibson reading it for a little bit.
Look at the sky,
yeah, I can't sing like that.
red, Lord, somebody's house is
and of course, he does it way better than me, but I can
at the
get
sky,
to it.
Turn hellfire red, Lord, somebody's house is burning down. Burn it down, burn it down, burn it all the way down, Jimmy. Make us burn in the flame that became your sound, Jimmy. Grab an old leg by his neck, making him show you your respect. Hoochie man, strangle him, hoochie coochie, hoodoo man, wrangle him, voodoo child. Make your steel string singing, aching, bending, breaking, sin, capitulate, then give in to.
But see, you get the idea, and you can look through that whole poem and see the way that the performance of it is translated into words that we can sort of get to, even though we can never get to the actual performance of a great performer like Reggie Gibson. So look at that, and look at how to transpose the performance onto the page, which is what's missing here. Okay, so let's move on to another poem. And once again, that was Xerxes Price with Better Off That Way. Let's go next to next in line we have Ruth Sline. This is opening up. And no comments, so we'll just see what it is opening up. And this is very much like the experience of reading submissions, having no idea what's going to come up, and you're just sort of it's a surprise every time. So here we go. This is opening up by Ruth Sline. I have to get the document. There you go. Opening up. Tonight is the night for one to reveal her true heart. We may not be able to understand why, but something good does come from unburying the issues that have messed our lives up, only to find one who is willing to listen to everything that you have revealed. I find that I am feeling like a bandage is ripped away, to find that letting go of all the torment is only short-lived, to make one consider all that has happened in their life, trying to mend all the problems, talking is what will uncover a lot of tears that have not been shed for so long. Tears are only the way to begin healing. From all the mental to all the physical, the way to heal is not always so plain to see. The times we have had from all the turmoil, from childhood to become an adult, we will never truly see all the damage done for all the choices we have made. The opening up is what will hurt us as most. But after so much talking, everything starts to work themselves out. All the fears that we have will be shown, even if we have to pry a chip off the shoulders we have. Everyone has a need to talk. It's just when we choose to start talking is how we know it is bad or more. And once again, that was opening up. You want the title with the poem. So if you're submitting, make sure to include the title. A lot of people just include the title in the submission page, but I only actually see because it's set up so that I'm trying to read these anonymized, and so I only see the actual document. So if you don't include the title in the poem when you're submitting, I don't see what the title is. So I would just see this as a submission, and I guess Tonight is the Night would be the title or untitled, but the title is actually opening up. So when you submit, If you don't include the title in your document, but don't include your name. That's what we ask. Okay, but anyway, and I hate these. I don't want that. Okay, tonight is the night for one to reveal her true heart. We may not be able to understand why, but something good does come from unburying. So we're just talking about what it's like to open up, but we're talking about the whole thing in an abstract way. And so what's missing in this poem is that I really want to see more of an image. We talked at the very beginning about how there's a continuum between living in the voice, living in the breath, and then living in the mind's eye. It's like your breath versus your mind's eye. It's the continuum between poetry and prose. And here we see what we get almost when we only have at the far end, we only have the breath to work with because there's no images being generated for the mind's eye. And so tonight is the night for one to reveal her true heart. Let's see how long it goes until we find an actual image that we can sort of build. Okay, so tonight is the night for one to reveal her true heart. We may not be able to understand why, but something good does come from unburying the issues that have messed our lives up, only to find one who is willing to listen to reveal to everything that you have revealed, to find that I am feeling like a bandage is ripped away. So really the first line is a bandage. Maybe you could say unburying, but it's more an act and you have to build a lot around it. But a bandage ripped away right here is like the first image we have at all, and it's a disembodied metaphor. And so we have the feeling of a bandage being ripped away. We can sort of see that, but where is it taking place? So we don't even have that to go with. So it's just this floating in space in our mind. It's just this image of a bandage, and that's the first image we get. To find that letting go of all the torment is only short-lived, to make one consider all that has happened in their life, trying to mend all the problems. So we're not getting any more images. All we have is that one little bandage floating in space. And so what I want to do with a poem like this, we're opening up Tonight is the Night. I want to see the night, show the night, make a scene that we can enter. The whole point is always just to make us become you as the speaker. Whoever the speaker is, we become you. And to get that, we need to enter some kind of space too. We can't just have just the voice without any kind of sense of some kind of scene building because there's nothing to enter. It's like we're floating in a void, and here a void with a bandage. So we need a lot more just images here, and that's what's missing in this poem. So add images, create a scene, tell a story, make it more like prose than it is now. And I think that's what's missing here. Otherwise, I mean, the sentiment, the feeling, you can feel the feeling of the poem coming through, that there's something I want to tell. But we don't get to engage with it because we're sort of floating in space. And so add images, like build the scene, show the night, show what you're doing as you're thinking this at least, or something. Or go to the memory that you're talking about. Like tell the whole story that we can, in a way that we can see and feel it. So that's what's missing here. And sorry, we're trying to go quickly, so I'm not looking at the comments a lot. I apologize for that. This week it's a less comment heavy week, but the poets, if you can look back and look at the comments as your poems go by on Facebook and Twitter. But let's move on. And again, that was Opening Up by Ruth Sline. Let's go next to this is Warwick de Groft. Warwick says, I have no real questions. I have just been writing alone for some time now, and I want to know where this sort of thing stands in the world of poetry. And so here, I mean, this is the whole point of the critique of the week. You really don't know what other people think of your poems unless you put them out in front of people who can tell you the truth or show you the truth in some way. And even if, a great thing to do is just a performance, like an open mic night. Or the Rattlecast open mic, where you can sort of see people's reactions and have some kind of feedback, because it's really hard to just be writing in a room without having any idea how it would reach people. And so doing a critique of the week is great. Doing a workshop with friends, like finding some kind of writers group is really valuable, or doing an open mic night. Something like that really helps. So let's see what Warwick has. This is Warwick de Groft. And here we go. And then again, there's no title in the document. So the document is called The Sound of Happiness, but I wouldn't see that reading the submission. And so just so you know that, something that kind of comes up frequently. But here. Happiness was a sound. What sound? If happiness was a sound, what sound would it be? Would it be the twinkling sound of the stars? Would it dance around your heart, forming rings of dust, transforming your heart into a beautiful stellar body? Would it be the sound of leaves blowing in the wind, the sound of faint rustling, lulling you into the peaceful slumber? Or would it be the sound of waves crashing against the shore, a constant rhythm, bringing with it the feelings of all who have cast their dreams into it, with all the power they could muster? Maybe it is the sound of life leaving the lungs of those lucky enough to pass on the culmination of all that they have felt, all that they have seen, all that they have loved. I think it is none of these things. I think it is the sound of silence. It is no sound I have heard has made me think of happiness more than the absence of sound at all. I kind of like the, where it goes with that, the general structure of the poem, moving to, a poem should have an arc too, because we're going from one place to another. It's a transformative speech, and so to be transformed, we have to have a sense of movement, and we do here because we go from the sound. What is the sound of happiness? That question, and then we answer it in a surprising way. And so I think that works overall. The thing that I would suggest here is just there's a lot of sort of cliches and trite language, even though the poem moves really well and there's some really good sounds and imagery. And there's a real sense of a nice pace to it too. Things like the twinkling sound of stars is kind of interesting because you don't think of that as a sound usually. So it's sort of a, what's that word where you see colors and you hear sights and things like that. I can't remember the word, but it's kind of like that going on. But then would dance around your, so the twinkling sound of stars was interesting, because it's unusual to have it be sound, but then it would dance around your heart, forming rings of dust. The dancing around your heart is just sort of a trite language to use. Heart is always something to avoid because it just feels so trite and like Valentine's Day. But forming rings of dust is interesting. Transforming your heart again into a beautiful stellar body. Would it be the sound of leaves blowing in the wind? So the sound of leaves is fine, but then blowing in the wind is just a cliche for leaves. Like leaves are always blowing in the wind. It's Bob Dylan. So so and the problem with cliche is that it already it's its own mental object. So leaves blowing in the wind doesn't sort of strike new chords in you. It doesn't make new neural connections. It's already this like constellation of things that already belong together in your brain, and so you kind of skip right over it. It doesn't have much impact. And so read more and avoid sort of trite language and cliches. But the sounds of this poem and the way that you're going about exploring your reality through language is real poetry. And so I'd suggest reading a lot more and avoiding sort of trite language. And that's kind of it with this poem. But it's definitely great for somebody who's writing and not getting any feedback whatsoever, as Warwick said. It's a really great start. And so if you like doing this, if you enjoyed the process of writing this poem, I definitely encourage you to continue and just read a lot more poems and write a lot more poems and keep at it, because there's really a good, a good start here, I guess you could say. Anything else to say? Or would it be the sound of waves crashing against the shore? See, waves crashing against the shore is another cliche. A constant rhythm, bringing with it the feelings of all who've cast their dreams into it, unto it. Unto is sort of it's not the way we'd speak anymore, so it feels archaic. But the idea, so the waves crashing against the shore is really cliche, but then the idea of it, the feelings of all who have cast their dreams into it, I really like that idea. And so there's definitely a poetic imagination going on here too. It's just a matter of finding the sort of poetic insights and avoiding the cliches and the trite things. Okay, we're going to move on to the next poem because we're moving as fast as we can. Next up, we have Submittable logged me out. Submittable logs you out constantly too. It's because so many people share accounts, and the main thing you pay for are user accounts, like user access, and so people end up saying like, oh, we only have one editor, and then they just share it. And so Submittable forces you to log out constantly, I think, to cover up for that fact and make it more annoying, to make sure you pay for a higher plan. But it annoys everybody, even if you do have only one editor. Anyway, Silence. This is Anthony Hess, and the poem is Silence. And sorry for, let's see. Yeah. So people are just saying kind of what I've been saying, but do look through the commentary too, because there's good commentary. I'm just gonna. It's not the kind of submissions yet where it's really worth spending a lot of time on, because there's sort of a general point that everybody would share. So I'm just gonna keep moving through and kind of ignoring the comments, but I do. I mean, the whole point is comments. It's fun to have the interaction. So thanks everybody for doing it still, and the poets can look back at them. Anyway, Silence. See, we have another poem, Silence, already, and let me see. I guess I'll we'll download this one in case you want to have some editing in Word. So the poet is Anthony Hess. The poem is Silence, and here we go with this one. Silence. Okay, so Silence, and this is kind of you have to. Does that work? Oh, the Zoom doesn't do it. Let's see, maybe. Okay, I'll have to do it like this. Okay, to get the whole poem in here. Okay. It's very long lines in this poem. And they're even longer than the word page here. So Silence. I'm trapped. Sorry. I'm trapped within the enigmatic nature of a silent mind, deafened by the idea of my indecipherable consciousness. This dogmatic dichotomy always cranking inside my head. Ideas pour, unable to contain this liquid that falls between my fingers. I speak, but the words scorch my lips and burn my connection to this world. I blow life into this molten quagmire, but this annealed existence shatters. I collect myself and begin to make life out of this quasi-reality in hopes to identify the man in the mirror. Help, for silence, so fragile, is broken. What am I doing here? Why is this? Doesn't scroll with me either. Why is it doing like that? Let's see. Oh, I put the wrong silence. That's why. That's why it was all messed up. Okay. This is better. Yeah, I was looking at it. Yeah, I picked the wrong screen capture. Okay, back to silence. Help. For silence so fragile, it is broken by its name. So I speak silence no longer the nature of my muted mind. Yet I yell, silence, silence, for something so fragile it does not crack. I struggle, scrambling to read the lines of my personality. Through my unquenchable dying hands, these intrinsic curves and creases explain my faults, but I am blind. I clamber to reach the truth as my identity pushes through the rifts like air escaping through the slits in the floorboards above, leaving me behind, left to suffocate, gasping for air as these waters begin to rise. I am exhausted. I try to keep myself afloat, balancing work, life, mind. I try to quench myself with all the possibilities of my life, but the water still slips through my fingers, leaving me parched as I watch my life drift away. I feel weightless, floating alongside the earth, always falling, always missing that link needed to ground myself in reality, to repeat and repeat and repeat my failures, always circling in hopes that I become grounded in my imperfections. Will this make me human because striving for perfection has only left me broken? I slip into... Hang on 1 second. Sorry. I slip into the arms of madness while trying to frantically stitch my reality back into existence. I stand by to watch and wonder whose life this is, this reflection. I sit and wonder how I know him, a face, a familiar face, a distant relative, a man who knows everything about me. I wish and wait to be finally introduced, but our paths are parallel. To become life itself is an unsettling experience rooted in fear, anguish, and hostility. I must diverge and meet at the crossroads and finally say hello. So it's an interesting poem. Again, I think this is the theme of the day in a way. Let me see if I can... Is that again? I think this poem could work really well as a performance piece. There's a real energy to it. You could hear that it was pulling my voice along. So there's a real sort of creative spark going on that's driving the poem forward, and we have a really good rhythm and a sense of that music that's pulling us through. But again, it's the kind of thing where you need more on the page than you do in person. Because if we're delivering a dramatic monologue, we have all the nuances of our speech, our facial, our facial expression, our body language, the tone of our voice. There's so many more things to work with, like so many more instruments to play. But then when you pull it back and just get the page, it ends up coming off a little flat unless you have certain elements. And you really need images, and you really need fresh language, because otherwise there's just not a lot to work with on the page itself. And so that's one of the things, again, with the slam poetry issue. It was hard to find things. There were great performances, and then when you take them and look at them just as poems on the page, they're really flat because so much is in the performance. And that's kind of the thing here. I'm trapped within the enigmatic nature of a silent mind, deafened by the idea of my indecipherable consciousness. And so that's very so if you were presenting that on stage, you could make that really interesting in the way that you're speaking and the way that you're acting it out. But something there is, but when you translate it onto the page and you put it just there, it ends up being very sort of vague and just an abstract concept without anything to really sink our teeth into and sort of connect on that level of a poem. Deafened by the idea of my indecipherable consciousness. This dogmatic dichotomy always cranking inside my head, ideas pour, unable to contain this liquid that falls between my fingers. I like the liquid that falls between my fingers. We get an image there, and so we need more of that, or like expand that metaphor. If we're working for the page, we need to do things like that to keep the reader engaged. It's just a different thing because there's so much less to go on. I speak, but the words scorch my lips and burn my connection. So we have the scorch my lips and burn. Another, similar to the last poem, a cliched type language. I blow life into this molten quagmire. I do like the molten quagmire. But this annealed existence shatters stars. I collect myself and begin to make life out of this quasi-reality in hopes to identify the man in the mirror. Help. And so we get this stuff like help by itself. I yell silence, silence, I struggle. These are the kind of things, too. Again, they work really well on the stage if you're performing the poem. But it's just words on the page. You really have to add so much as a reader. Like imagine, maybe I'm just thinking of slam poetry so much because we're doing a slam for part of our Wrightwood Arts and Wine Festival in a month, so I'm organizing that right now. But it's really to imagine with the sort of frenetic energy of this poem, when you get to the silence, it being really powerful, right? Because you have a room full of people that are like listening to your breath coming out into the microphone, and then there's this silence that happens, right? So when it's like, I yell silence, silence, and you're yelling and you're raising your voice for something so fragile it does not crack, I struggle. And then the actual quiet in the room for the I struggle part would be really profound and powerful in that space. But we don't have that to work with in a poem on a page. We're just creating that ourselves. And so, so anytime you see poems that use like yelling at you, by all caps or something like that, it's a sign that it's a struggle to get it onto the page. And when we're getting something onto the page, what we have to do is focus on, the music, the freshness of the language, and the images that we're creating, because that's how things are conveyed through just words on a page. And so there's not enough of that to carry us along. And so what we would have to do is sort of condense and pull it in and focus on the images and the concepts. And then the other thing I wanted to point out too, just this help too, is at the end. So it has this real great emotional energy, which I'm feeling and enjoying. It's just not quite enough because of the structure of what it's doing. But those aspects are really powerful and work really well. But then at the end, we get a sort of a summary of the poem. So I slip into the arms of madness while trying to frantically stitch my reality back into existence, stand by to watch and wonder whose life this is, this reflection. So we could end it there, and it would work pretty well as an ending. But we go on and with this sort of, I sit and wonder how I know him, a familiar face, a distant relative, a man who knows everything about me. Do you feel how this is like we shifted gears and now we're summarizing? There's a way that when we feel like we haven't presented our case or what we're trying to get to in a poem well enough, and we're worried that the reader's not going to understand it, we want to summarize. And this turns into the summarizing voice. A man who knows everything about me. I wish and wait to be finally introduced, but our paths are parallel. Did you feel that doesn't have the same energy at all? Because we're in a totally different register. We were in this sort of ecstatic projection of emotion onto the page before, and then it shifts to the summary voice, which is so slow and sort of bland in comparison. And it's just explaining what the poem's about. So cut this. Just get rid of this. To become life itself is an unsettling experience rooted in fear, anguish, and hostility. See how that, like, it just feels like an essay that you would submit, like a freshman essay or something in college, where it has that, this book is rooted in fear, anguish, and hostility. That list of like characteristics of something. It's so different from the voice of the actual poem. It's not the poem. So get rid of this at the end. I think the ending, meeting and saying hello, that could work if you sort of pull it back into the energy here, but just do the energy and then cut it off, and then let us interpret the poem how we're going to. And I think, and have faith that we will interpret the poem in an interesting way, because that's what you have to do with a poem. You have to have that leap of faith too. So, so cut the ending as well. Okay, let's continue. I think, let's see. We'll do one more. It's 10:04. And I do this time. I don't have like all day today. I really have a ton of work to do. I'm putting the next issues together, and I have to finish them both by Monday. Like I really have to. So, and I have a board meeting too about the festival coming up. So, anyway, let's go to the next poem. We've gotten through, I think, 5 of these. Let's do 6, then we'll call it a day. And it's interesting too. Though, this is really you get. Doing it this way, which we usually don't do. Usually, if you're new, we usually pick out 2 poets with a lot of meat to dig into, and then do 2 poems each by them, and it's 4 poems, and we take more time on it. But going through quickly like this shows the experience of reading it as an editor. So you can kind of imagine you're turning it to the next poem. You've read this poem, and now you're just flipping to the next one. And the variety and the differences in craft and style come across really clearly, I think, as we do this. So imagine you're an editor, and this is what it's like, because people always wonder, or often do, what it's like. So here, 2 Faces of Love is the poem. Well, the document is called 2 Faces of Love, but the poem is called Pure Chance, and this is Seth Kitamura. So let's open this one, and I'll open it the right way this time so I can actually scroll and stuff on the page. Okay. I'm sorry, I do think I'm coming down with a bit of a cold, or maybe just allergies. It is that time of year. Anyway, here we go. Pure chance. I'm gonna clear it up and then maybe get a little bigger. It's kind of small font. Pure chance. Okay. Pure chance. And again, this is Seth Ketamir. It'll be the last poem we do today. By pure chance was it not that we met to welcome each other in our lives, built a paradise we both rule supreme over? In morning, when time seemed to stand still, alas, time allows neither a breath of relief nor a breath of desperation before it started to move. When the sea started to dance, the waves devoured our footprints on the sand. When the sun started to rise higher, the heat burned our skin to blisters. When the wind started to breathe, the noise around us never stopped. All things have to move as they were meant to. All things have to end as they were meant to. And when the paradise began to rot and the perfection was from the perfection it once was, I find myself desperately trying to remember the memories of you. The harsh stillness of the late afternoon disturbed by the infernal storm, a reminder of how you came and went as quickly as lightning, your departure as haunting as thunder. Deaf, dazed, and frightened, my flesh and bones I could no longer feel. Yet for every beat of my heart I felt, for every bit of the aching separation, numbness overwhelmed me. Darkness blinds me, but soon enough the orange hues of the dusk arrive with a message breathing down my neck. By pure chance as well, was it not that we met just to say goodbye? The seas will soon calm down and bring about lullabies of serenity and the shores full of seashells. The sun will soon rest for the day. Let the moon cool your skin and illuminate the night with stars. The wind will soon caress your face, drying the tears, kissing your lips with the hope of tomorrow. All things had to end as they were meant to. All things still move as they were meant to. And then the second poem, Flowers, but we'll just do this one, Pure Chance. And again, it's similar to the last poem, where we just have too much cliched language, too much trite language, even though there's some really good rhythms to it. So, by pure chance was it not that we met to welcome each other in our lives. And so at the beginning, there's not a whole lot to grab onto here. So we could sort of cut this. Built a paradise we both rule supreme over, a morning when time seemed to stand still. Alas, time allows neither a breath of relief nor a breath of desperation before it started to move. When the sea, I would start this poem and cut the first three lines, because we're kind of spinning our wheels, these first three lines. We don't get an image, we're not building a scene yet, we don't know who the characters really are. It's not adding a lot of detail, actually, that creates a scene and makes us sort of give us something we can enter as readers. But if we start here, pure chance, when the sea started to dance, the waves devoured our footprints in the sand. So it starts with that metaphor, which is really image-based. And so we get to enter that metaphor, and then we have a place to live within the poem. And so it's a much better jumping-off point to start with when the sea started to dance. And then it has this rhythm, too. So this is where the poem really had picked up. Before we had this sort of spinning its wheels type thing. Alas, time allows neither breath. We're summarizing. It's like a preamble before we even get to the poem. And we don't need that. You might need that to write your way into the poem, but we don't need that as readers. So pure chance. When the sea started to dance, the waves devoured our footprints in the sand. When the sun started to rise higher, the heat burned our skin to blisters. When the wind started to breathe, the noise around us never stopped. So we have this repetition. There's a really great repetition, not only in the way that the sentence is structured, when the, but there's also a syntactical repetition too, that works really well for the poem. It feels like it fits well as a poem. And so we're really into the poem here. But then what I was saying, how many poems just today have had heat burning? Or, there's certain things that just come up a lot as sort of metaphors for emotional feelings and hearts and burning and things like that are just really, regular. We see it all the time. And so it doesn't spark anything in our imaginations because it's just everywhere. It's sort of ubiquitous, trite speech at this point, although the first time people said it was interesting. So There's a great rhythm to this poem and an interesting subject matter, but you have to really watch out for stuff like heat burning our skin to blisters, because it's just such a typical thing to see in a poem. When the wind started to breathe, the noise around us never stopped. All things have to move as they were meant to. All things have to end as they were meant to. So again, we get this really nice repetition. There's a real, this poet, Seth Ketamira, has a real ear for language. You can hear the music in the ways that the poet's presenting repetition, especially. But just in the rhythm of the language too has a real music to it. So it's somebody you can tell who reads a good amount and has an ear for poetry. It's just a matter of really having a fine tooth and just cutthroat look at yourself and what is a cliche and what is trite and what is original, and find a way to pull out as much original stuff from your subconscious as you can, and be honest and ignore the stuff that is trite and unoriginal. And so that's really the thing, is to look and have an honest like self-reflection as you're writing, and maybe that's the editing process after the fact. A lot of people, pour out their heart on a poem, but then you have to shape it and take out the things that aren't working and are trite like that, and then just keep the fresh, original, interesting stuff. And so that's what we have to focus on here. When the paradise began to rot from the perfection it once was, I find myself desperately trying to remember the memories of you. And so how much, so there's a lot of clunkiness here. So I find myself desperately trying to remember. How much better does it sound if it's just, I'm trying to remember the memories of you, and getting rid of that, find myself desperately. Like, finding myself doesn't add a whole lot. Like, we add that in through the voice. But if it's just, I'm trying to remember the memories of you, the harsh stillness of late afternoon, that's nice. I mean, that's really good. So that's a kind of editing process too. So these are poems that just need more editing and more condensing, and getting rid of the, keeping what's really working and slicing out what's not, and just adding what's just adding to the words on the page, but not adding to the meaning that you're creating. A reminder of how you came and went as quick as lightning. So again, as quick as lightning is a cliche. Your departure is haunting as thunder. So haunting as thunder is less. So you can get away in a poem with saying something about your departure haunting as thunder, because that's not really a cliche yet. But quick as lightning is totally a cliche. And so it falls on us as readers really flatly. Deaf, dazed, and frightened, my flesh and bones. Again, flesh and bones. I mean, these are things that... they're just cliches. I can no longer feel yet for every beat of my heart. Again, beat of my heart. So we got to pull this stuff out and focus on the unique stuff. Numbness felt for every bit of this aching separation. Numbness overwhelmed me. Darkness blinds me. But soon enough, the orange hues of dusk arrived with a message breathing down my neck. I like the orange hues of dusk arrived. The breathing down my neck, again, cliche. So it pulls, every time you get to that, you're having this whole, really what's happening in a poem, you're trying to create new neural connections in the reader's brain, and to make us experience the world and our existence in a different way. And that's why poetry is enriching, and why we learn so much from it in a way that it's hard to articulate sometimes. And what happens when you have a cliche, though, is it's just hitting something that it's just rerun. It's just a rerun, like it's like a TV show you've seen 50 times. It just doesn't add anything because you've already seen it. And so that's why I avoid cliches. It's just like empty space. It might as well be nothing. Like the content, the value added from that is zero. And so you might as well not spend our time when you're adding zero value. And that's what a cliche does. It adds zero value to the poem. And so you got to cut those. Okay. The seas will soon calm down and bring about lullaby of serenity, and the shores full of seashells. I like the shores full of seashells. The sun will soon rest for the day. Let the moon cool your skin and illuminate the night with stars. I kind of like the way the stars tend to be cliche and stuff, but I think there's a nice sound to that. The wind will soon caress your face, drying the tears, kissing your lips with the hope of tomorrow. All the things had to end as they were meant to. All the things still move as they were meant to. And so I like this last line too. When we get into the rhythm, where there's that repetition going on in this poem in particular, there's a real sense of the poetry sort of erupting from the imagination. And so this is where the poem's really working. In this section at the very end, and this section at the beginning, where we're doing that. And so notice that too as you're cutting down poems of what actually works. Okay, so it's 10:15. I really got to go because I have to start working on other things. But thanks so much for participating. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the comments, but we should just move on. But thanks so much for leaving them. Brian O'Sullivan suggests make it a hymen, which is always a good suggestion. Let's see over here. Yeah, there's a better poem here, says Potter O'Donoghue. Yeah. Yeah, so it's just the same thing we're talking about. But this is the experience of reading submissions. Like, this is the, people are coming in at all levels, and it's important to move on from this step, where you're having too many cliches or you're not translating your voice onto the page. That comes up so much in submissions. Like you people ask why, how can you read through so many poems? And that's because, a lot of submissions just have these sort of very obvious quick flaws that, it's just a matter of, getting rid of cliches, keeping fresh language, and getting the actual voice onto the page. So, anyway, that is the show for today. Hope it was helpful to everybody. We always try to be as helpful as possible. Let's see. So this week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be, speaking of teaching, the next week's guest is going to be Tresha Faye Hefner. Tresha is the founder and director of the Poetry Salon, which is a really wonderful poetry group. They do a whole bunch of podcasts and workshops and a whole bunch of things. She's been doing that for 10 or 15 years. I can't remember how old it is. She has a book based on that, Method and Mystery, a research-based guide to teaching poetry. And so, and she's a really interesting person, Tresha Faye Hefner. I don't know her that well, but I've met her a few times, and I'm really interested in learning more. I'm excited for this episode. She also has a new book, which I still don't have the title or the cover of. There's a new book from Pine Something Press by Tresha Faye Hefner. So we'll be reading from poems from that, but talking about teaching poetry and the method and mystery of it, which is just fascinating to me. I'm really looking forward to it. That is Monday's guest on the Rattlecast, number 191. The prompt for this week was It was based on Julia Kolchinsky-Dasbach's book from last week, 40 Weeks, where she takes those emails that say how large your baby is based on a fruit. So it's like, it's an apricot this week, it's a peach this week, that kind of thing. And she made a poem out of each of those. And then she also has these poems where she uses colons to string together similes throughout the whole poem. So you kind of have to go back and watch that episode to understand this prompt. But the prompt is to take some kind of object, use it as a metaphor, and then write it in that style where colons are a string of similes, if that makes sense. And so it might not, but go back and watch that episode. You'll see maybe 3 or 4 examples of her poems that do that. And write a poem like that in some way. That's the prompt for next week. Rattlecast number 191 with Tresha Faye Hefner. Monday, April 24th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great weekend. I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.